Imagine an ordinary English girl born in 1904 on the fog-covered streets of London, claiming that she had lived 3,000 years earlier in ancient Egypt and that she had been the lover of a pharaoh. How reasonable does that sound? Now imagine that the same woman could describe the hidden chambers of a temple she had never seen with astonishing precision. What if she could point archaeologists to a garden they had searched for unsuccessfully for years and be proven right? And what if she could read texts written in ancient Egyptian without ever being taught the language? The story of Dorothy Eady is considered one of the most powerful, well-documented, and controversial cases in reincarnation research. For 70 years, she told the same story. She never contradicted herself, she never changed her account, and most remarkably, many of her claims were later confirmed through scientific excavations. The story you're about to hear is unsettling. It forces you to question long-held beliefs. It may even shake your understanding of life and consciousness itself. Because this is not simply a matter of belief or disbelief. This is a case supported by academic reports, archaeological discoveries, and tangible evidence. The child who fell down the stairs. On a freezing winter day in 1907, in London's Blackheath district, 3-year-old Dorothy Eady fell down the wooden staircase of her family home. She struck her head against the stone floor with such force that the attending doctor declared her dead. Her family was devastated. Her lifeless body was removed from the room for nearly an hour. But when the doctor returned to offer his condolences, something extraordinary happened. Dorothy was breathing. Her eyes were open. From a medical standpoint, this should not have been possible. According to the medical knowledge of the time, surviving such a severe head injury was considered miraculous. Yet the true mystery began after she recovered. Following the accident, Dorothy was no longer the same child. It was as if her personality had changed overnight. She cried constantly, insisting that she wanted to go home. The strange part was that she was already home. No matter how often her parents reassured her, she refused to accept it. "No," she said, "this is not my home. My real home is somewhere else. There are great pillars there, a beautiful garden, and a river." At first, her family explained everything as confusion caused by the accident. Perhaps it was a brain injury or maybe a psychological shock. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Dorothy's dreams became sharper, richer, and far more detailed. What she described was no longer just a house, it was an entire life. She spoke of temples, priestesses, and a pharaoh. One day, her family took her to the British Museum. The moment they entered the ancient Egypt section, Dorothy lost control. She froze in front of the mummies and statues behind the glass. Then suddenly she began to run. She rushed through the exhibition halls, trying to kiss everything she saw. "These are my people!" she shouted. "I'm home!" Security guards tried to stop her while her mother stood frozen with embarrassment. But for Dorothy, this moment felt like awakening. This was the place she could never forget. This was her real home. Hieroglyphs that came at night. As Dorothy grew older, her memories only intensified. By the age of 10, she began having recurring dreams. In these dreams, an elderly man taught her ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Without reading books or attending lessons, she was learning the language. Each morning, she wrote down the symbols she had seen and later compared them with books in the library. Astonishingly, her translations were correct. Concerned, the family consulted doctors and psychiatrists. Some believed she was lost in a fantasy world, others feared early signs of schizophrenia. Yet, Dorothy never hesitated. Her story never changed. The details remained consistent. There were no contradictions. At 14, she saw a photograph of the Seti I temple in Abydos in a magazine. The moment she saw it, she fainted. When she regained consciousness, she was crying. "That's it," she said. "That's my home. I lived there." From that moment on, it was no longer just a feeling. Dorothy could describe the temple in remarkable detail. Corridors, rooms, and gardens she had never physically seen. She went even further, claiming there was a sacred garden within the temple grounds and that archaeologists had yet to uncover a hidden section. By the time Dorothy turned 20, she decided to tell her story in full. She wrote everything down and revealed what she claimed was her true name, Bentreshyt, meaning daughter of the Nile. From that point on, she described her life from 3,000 years earlier in extraordinary detail. According to her account, she was born around 1300 BCE near Abydos into an ordinary family. At a very young age, she was sent to the temple to be trained as a priestess. She grew up serving in the Temple of Osiris, raised under strict rules and sacred rituals. That life continued unchanged until she was 14. That was the year Pharaoh Seti I visited the temple. Bentreshyt caught his attention. A forbidden relationship began between them. Priestesses were bound by a vow of chastity, and breaking it meant death. Yet love proved stronger than fear. Before long, Bentreshyt became pregnant. There was no way to hide it. She was summoned by the high priest. "Who is responsible?" he demanded. "Who did this to you?" Bentreshyt refused to betray the pharaoh. She would not endanger his throne, his honor, or his kingdom. She remained silent. That night, she descended into the lower chambers of the temple. She prepared a poison with her own hands, and she drank it. She was 15 years old. She died for love, for her unborn child, for the pharaoh. This was the story Dorothy Eady told. Tragic, romantic, rich in detail, and most importantly, many parts of it would later prove verifiable. The soul that returned to Egypt. In 1933, at the age of 29, Dorothy made a decision that stunned everyone. She was moving to Egypt. Her family was horrified. Friends tried desperately to pull her back from what they saw as an obsession, but Dorothy was resolute. "I'm going home," she said. And she left, alone. She settled in Cairo. There, she married an Egyptian teacher named Imam Abdel-Magid. They had a son, whom she named Seti, after the pharaoh. People soon began calling her Omm Sety, which in Arabic means mother of Seti. The marriage did not last. Her husband struggled to cope with Dorothy's behavior. She would wake in the middle of the night reciting ancient prayers. She claimed to speak with the spirit of Pharaoh Seti. She wrote hieroglyphs on the walls. Eventually, her husband took her to a psychiatrist. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Dorothy rejected the diagnosis and the medication. She said, "I'm not sick. I remember." They divorced in 1952. For Dorothy, this was not a collapse. It was freedom. Nothing stood in her way anymore. At last, she could move toward her true destination, Abydos. The encounter at Abydos. In 1956, Dorothy finally arrived in Abydos. She was 52 years old, yet the excitement inside her felt identical to that of a 3-year-old child. The moment she stepped through the temple gates, her knees began to shake. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm home," she said. "After 75 years, I'm finally home." At first, the temple guardian found the elderly Englishwoman strange. Watching her wander through an ancient Egyptian temple, touching the walls, kissing the hieroglyphs, it all seemed unusual. But something soon became clear. Dorothy knew the temple, every corridor, every corner, as if it were etched into her memory. One day, while walking through a dark passageway, Dorothy suddenly stopped. "There should be a room here," she said. "On the left, a small doorway." The guardian stared at the wall in disbelief. It was solid stone, No markings, no signs. But Dorothy insisted. When excavations began, a doorway was uncovered exactly where she had indicated, a hidden chamber, unknown for centuries. Inside were remnants of ritual objects once stored there. Could this really be coincidence? Archaeological shockwaves. Dorothy began working closely with Egyptian archaeologist Dr. Abdel Kader. Initially skeptical, the professor gradually became fascinated by her extraordinary knowledge. Dorothy drew detailed maps of the temple, marking areas that had never been excavated. She said, "There was a garden here. A large, sacred garden. Trees, pools, flowers. I used to spend hours there." Archaeologists had searched that area for years without finding any evidence of a garden, yet following Dorothy's insistence, they began digging. 2 weeks later, remnants of an ancient irrigation system were uncovered, then fossilized tree roots, then the foundation of a pool. The garden was real, located precisely where Dorothy had described. Dr. Kader now showed Dorothy excavation notes and asked for her help. "Can you read this hieroglyphic text?" he would ask. Dorothy would put on her glasses, study the inscription, and translate it fluently in ancient Egyptian, without formal training or education. On one occasion, she burst into tears on seeing a fragment of papyrus recovered during a dig. She said, "This is my handwriting. I wrote this, a prayer to Osiris." The papyrus was analyzed in a laboratory. The dating was clear, around 13 BCE, exactly the period Dorothy had always claimed. After Dorothy began living in Abydos, her neighbors started noticing strange things at night. Lights stayed on in her house until the early hours of the morning. Voices could be heard from inside. Yet Dorothy lived alone. Who was she talking to? She did not hide the truth from those close to her. "He comes," she said. "Seti comes, every night." Dorothy claimed that the spirit of Pharaoh Seti visited her regularly. She said they spoke, remembered their past together, and that their relationship still continued. To her, this was not imagination, it was a living connection. Psychiatrists describe the phenomenon as erotic hallucinations, but for Dorothy, it felt undeniably real. One day, she showed a journalist unusual marks on her body. Bruises covered her neck, back, and arms, as if someone had gripped her tightly. "He gets jealous sometimes," she said with a smile. "He's very passionate." Medicine struggled to explain it. It seemed impossible for an elderly woman to inflict such marks on herself. Was it a form of stigmata, a psychosomatic response, or was something unseen truly visiting her? What does science say? The case of Dorothy Eady became a goldmine for reincarnation researchers. Most cases rely on personal testimony that cannot be verified. Dorothy's claims, however, could be tested against archaeological evidence. Egyptian psychiatrist Dr. Hani El-Zaini studied Dorothy for many years. His conclusion was clear. There are no signs of psychosis, no schizophrenia, no bipolar disorder. Her intelligence is above average. She is logical, consistent, and grounded in reality. The only unusual aspect is her claim of remembering a life from 3,000 years ago. From the University of Virginia, Dr. Ian Stevenson, one of the world's most respected reincarnation researchers, also examined the case. He published his findings in the Journal of the American Society for Psychical Research. The report stated, "The Bentreshyt case represents one of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the reincarnation hypothesis. The subject's possession of information that could not have been acquired through normal means remains unexplained." Naturally, skeptics pushed back. Perhaps she secretly studied ancient Egyptian texts, they argued. Perhaps she memorized everything. But this theory eventually collapsed. Some of the information Dorothy provided did not exist in any books at the time. The sites had not yet been excavated, and in later years, archaeological discoveries confirmed her statements, one by one. For example, she once claimed there was a hidden passage in the temple's northern wall. In the 1960s, no one knew such a passage existed. Years later, during restoration work in 1980, it was discovered exactly where she had described it. She also spoke about small mummies in the temple's underground chambers. "Animals," she said, "sacred cats and ibises. We buried them there." When the basement was excavated in the 1970s, hundreds of animal mummies were uncovered. Cats, ibises, sacred creatures placed there for ritual purposes. How could she have known? Final breath. Dorothy Eady passed away on April 27, 1981, in her modest home in Abydos. She was 77 years old. Before her death, her final wish was clear. "Bury me near the temple. Let me be close to Osiris, close to Seti." Her wish was honored. She was laid to rest in a small Coptic cemetery beneath the shadow of the temple. Her gravestone bore two names, Omm Sety, Bentreshyt. After her death, archaeologists examined the notes she left behind. Hundreds of pages, notebooks filled with hieroglyphs, detailed descriptions of Abydos, rituals, temple layouts, maps, and observations. Even today, some excavation teams consult Dorothy's notes. Remarkably, what she recorded has at times proven more accurate than official archaeological reports. Unanswered questions. So what truly happened? Did Dorothy Eady genuinely live 3,000 years ago as Bentreshyt? Or was she an extraordinary psychological case, gifted with an exceptional memory and imagination? Skeptics offer another explanation. Perhaps she read something as a child, forgot the source, and later believed the knowledge was her own. This phenomenon is known as cryptomnesia, forgetting where information came from and mistaking it for original thought. Yet this theory leaves a major question unanswered. How did Dorothy know details that did not exist in any books at the time? Some scientists suggest genetic memory, the idea that ancestral memories might somehow be encoded in DNA. But Dorothy had no known Egyptian ancestry. She was English, from a northern lineage. Another theory points to cosmic consciousness, or Akashic records, the idea that the universe stores all knowledge accessible to certain sensitive individuals. But this concept cannot be scientifically tested. That leaves one final possibility: reincarnation. The idea that the soul is reborn into another body after death. Dorothy believed in this with all her heart, and she lived her life accordingly. Dorothy Eady was not alone. Around the world, thousands of people claim to remember past lives. Most of these cases, however, cannot be proven. The stories remain personal, unverified, unsupported by evidence. What made Dorothy's case unique was precisely this. Her claims were backed by tangible archaeological confirmation. A similar case occurred in India. A young girl named Shanti Devi insisted that she had lived a previous life in another city, where she was married and had a child. When researchers took her to the city she described, they found the family she spoke of. Shanti recognized the house, the rooms, the objects, details she had never seen before. Another remarkable example is the James Leininger case. An American boy claimed to remember being a fighter pilot shot down during World War II. He knew the aircraft model, the crash location, and the names of fellow pilots. Military records later confirmed what he said. Yet, even among these cases, one thing stands out. Few are as long-lasting, consistent, and detailed as Dorothy Eady's. The philosophical question. If reincarnation is real, what does that mean for us? Is death truly an ending, or merely the beginning of another journey? Do we lose our loved ones forever, or will we meet them again in different forms? For Dorothy, love was stronger than death. 3,000 years had passed, yet she still loved Seti. She still longed for him. And according to her belief, after death, she would finally reunite with him. Forever. Perhaps romantic, perhaps irrational. But anyone who looked into Dorothy's eyes could see the peace this belief gave her. She had lived in two worlds, and in both, she found love. Abydos today. If you visit Abydos today, you can still trace Dorothy's presence. Local guides tell her story. Omm Sety lived here, they say. No one knew the temple better than she did. Some visitors stop in front of Dorothy's former home, a small, low house with earthen walls. It now stands empty, yet the walls still bear hieroglyphs written in her hand. Prayers, symbols, perhaps unfinished messages of love. When night falls, temple guards still report strange experiences. Lights, shadows. Occasionally, a woman's voice echoing from within the temple, whispering words in ancient Egyptian. Are there ghosts? Or is it just the wind? We don't know, but many believe Dorothy's spirit never left. They believe she is still there, waiting for her Pharaoh. So, what do you think? Was Dorothy Eady mentally unwell, or was she truly remembering a life lived 3,000 years ago? Is reincarnation possible, or are these experiences nothing more than tricks of the human brain? Even today, science cannot offer a definitive answer. Reincarnation is not something that can be tested in a laboratory. It cannot be placed in a test tube. It cannot be measured through controlled experiments. All that remains are cases, testimonies, indirect evidence. But perhaps the answer doesn't live in our minds. Perhaps it lives in our hearts. Some things may simply lie beyond numbers and formulas. Love, death, the soul. Maybe these exist outside the boundaries of science. Dorothy Eady seemed to understand this, and she lived her entire life according to that belief. Was she happy? Absolutely, because she loved both of her lives. The first, for the love she lived. The second, for the memory of that love. And maybe, somewhere right now, she is living a third life. Who knows? Perhaps as a child in a different family, perhaps once again in Egypt. Perhaps this time, finally finding the ending she never had. Or maybe she has already reunited with Seti on the other side, forever. Final word. The story of Dorothy Eady reminds us that life is far more mysterious than we often admit. Science does not explain everything. Some experiences exist beyond logic and measurement. And perhaps most importantly, love may be the most powerful force, both in this life and beyond. One day, science may prove reincarnation, or it may completely disprove it. Until then, Dorothy's story will continue to live on as a mystery, as a hope, as a legacy. And maybe, somewhere right now, she is living a third life. Who knows? Perhaps as a child in a different family, perhaps once again in Egypt, perhaps this time finally finding the ending she never had. Or maybe she has already reunited with Seti on the other side, forever.